Hello and welcome to Global News Factory. I'm your host Vikrant. The UK today is a country that still talks like an empire but walks like a struggling middle power. The days of ruling the seas and dictating global policies are long gone, but Westminster still thinks of itself as a crown jewel locked in the attic. In February, Prime Minister Keir Starmer made a bold, or rather delusional proclamation that Britain was, I'm quoting, ready and willing to contribute to security guarantees to Ukraine by putting our own troops on the ground if necessary. Now, Starmer might have believed he was making a Churchillian statement, but he forgot one small detail. The UK no longer has the muscle to back up such heavy words. UK's army today is a shadow of its former self. In 2000, the UK had around 100,000 full-time trained personnel. Now, barely 70,000. And that is not an army, that is a speed bump against a large-scale offensive. The UK troops would be chewed up in days. Years of defense cuts have hollowed out not just troop numbers, but the very ability to fight a sustained modern war. The UK has no large-scale manufacturing capacity for weapons anymore. Ammo's stockpiles are pitiful. Production lines that could churn out war material during the Cold War have long been dismantled. Airfields and storage depots were abandoned decades ago. Without massive immediate capital investment, Britain cannot even pretend to be ready for a long, bloody conflict. And perhaps Starmer has now realized that harsh reality. Because, see this, the Times has reported that Britain has quietly dropped its grand plans of deploying 30,000 troops to Ukraine's ports and cities after a hypothetical ceasefire between Moscow and Kiev. Instead, the new plan is embarrassingly modest, flying Typhoons or F-35s over western Ukraine in so-called air reassurance missions, plus training Kiev forces and clearing Black Sea mines. Translation: they will show up for symbolic flybys and photo ops, but stay far from real combat. It is an enormous climb down. The gap between Starmer's bold February speech and today's sheepish retreat is the gap between fantasy and Britain's current reality. And just when you think it could not get worse for the UK's image, in comes a scandal straight from a Cold War nightmare. Earlier this year, between January and April, a Category A nuclear incident, the most serious classification, occurred at HMNB Clyde in Faslane, Scotland. This base houses the entirety of Britain's nuclear submarine fleet. Now, Category A means there is an actual or high potential for a radioactive release to the environment. Did radioactive material escape? The Ministry of Defense would not say it. The silence is as alarming as the incident itself. This is not just about one mishap, it points to deeper rot, poor maintenance of nuclear weapons, aging infrastructure, and a lack of transparency that should worry Britain's allies as much as its own citizens. And the bad news keeps stacking. In March, Dr. Azim Ibrahim, a research professor, released a report predicting that Britain is sliding into the ranks of second-tier European nations on par with Spain or Italy. He argues that economic decline coupled with military weakness will make the UK increasingly irrelevant to its traditional allies. His analysis even warns that within next 5 years, Poland will overtake the UK in per capita income. That is not just a downgrade, that is a collapse in status. So here is the cold truth. The UK of today is not the UK of 1950s. It is not even the UK of 1980s. It is a country that still talks like it can shape global events, but lacks the resources the manpower, and the economic base to follow through. UK elites can keep making Churchillian statements, but without rebuilding the economy and the military, the world will keep seeing through the act. And if Poland really does overtake Britain in wealth, while the Royal Navy is busy having nuclear incidents, the empire's last illusion might shatter very soon. And moving on, India is marking its 79th Independence Day today, but the mood is not just patriotic, it is defiant. Because independence is not just about a flag hoisting ceremony and a prime minister's speech. Independence is about sovereignty. It is about freedom to make your own choices. And today, that sovereignty is under attack. From where? From Washington, D.C. Trump's America is threatening tariffs, a jaw-dropping 50% right now, against India for refusing to toe the US line on Russian oil. And if the Alaska talks between Moscow and US fail, then Scott Bessent has already warned those tariffs could go even higher. The message is simple: banned or be punished. Sounds familiar, right? It should, because half a century ago, America tried the same game. Back then, it was not about oil, it was about survival. It was the year 1971. East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, was in flames. Millions of refugees were flooding into India after a brutal crackdown by Pakistan's military in East Pakistan. India, under Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, decided that it had seen enough. Delhi began preparing for war to stop the genocide in East Pakistan. And Pakistan, it had a powerful best friend, the USA. Richard Nixon was in the White House, Henry Kissinger was running the foreign policy, and they saw Pakistan as a key Cold War ally, the bridge to opening ties with China. So, when India stood up for East Pakistan's people, Washington did not see the cause behind the mission. It saw a threat to its geopolitical chessboard. And here is where the bullying began. The US suspended military aid to India. It pushed the UN to condemn India's actions. And when the war broke out in December 1971, Nixon went one step further. He sent the USS Enterprise, the world's most powerful aircraft carrier, into the Bay of Bengal as a warning to India. Bay of Bengal is right there on your screen. It was a direct, unspoken threat. Threat was, stop your advance or face American firepower. But here is the twist. India did not blink because it was not alone. Indira Gandhi had signed a 20-year treaty of peace, friendship, and cooperation with the Soviet Union just months earlier, months before this attack. And Moscow delivered. The Soviets sent their own naval task force from Vladivostok, trailing the American fleet. They made it clear if the US intervened directly, the USSR would respond. And that show of force was enough. The American fleet turned back. The war ended in 13 days with India's decisive victory and the birth of Bangladesh.
At 4 p.m. on the 16th of December 1971, Lieutenant General A.A.K. Niazi signed the instrument of surrender and placed himself and his troops under the command of Lieutenant General J.S. Arora, GOC in C, Eastern Command, who also held command of the Bangladesh forces. At the Dhaka Golf Course, the Dhaka garrison formally laid down their arms before Lieutenant General Sagat Singh, GOC 4 Corps. Farewell parade at Dhaka. The Indian Army, having done its good work, returned with all the love, affection and respect Bangladesh could offer.
The lesson was burned into India's strategic memory. The US is transactional, Russia or the Soviet Union then is trustworthy. Fast forward to today, Washington is again trying to arm twist India into abandoning its own foreign policy, abandoning its independence. This time, the pressure is over Russian oil, a lifeline for India's energy security. Trump wants India to stop buying from Russia and pay more for American oil. Delhi's answer? A polite but firm no. And just like in 1971, the US response is economic coercion, massive tariffs, and the threat of more if India does not fall in line. But there is one big difference though. Back then, India needed the Soviet Union's military shield. India was weak. Today, India is economically and militarily far stronger. It does not need anyone to fight its battles. Yet, it remembers its friends. And that's why India is standing firmly with Russia, buying oil, expanding trade, and even helping Moscow bypass Western sanctions. It is not about charity, it is about trust built over decades. America sees ties, friendships as contracts, negotiable, revocable, and always conditional. Russia sees them as commitments. In 1971, when India was in a crisis, the Soviets did not send ultimatums or threats, they sent ships. Right now, when Russia is in a crisis, India is not sending sympathy cards, it is sending business. And this is why the US, no matter how many summits, hugs, and photo ops it throws at India, the US will never be its best friend. Because friendship is not built in air conditioned conference rooms, it is built in the heat of a crisis. When you find out who shows up for you and who shows up against you. And in that test, Russia has never failed India. Again, happy Independence Day to India and to all the Indians and all the people who observe India. With ancient wisdom and new dreams, she balances past and future. Her peaceful heart teaches that love triumphs over hate. Through every sacrifice, India reminds us to cherish freedom's light. And that is all for now. Thank you very much for being with me watching GNF.